Draconic Dragon is our response to the Forgetful Fish format, or Dan as I like to call it. 120 cards in a deck, you share a library and you share a graveyard, 40 life, you both have a commander, and the commander in this case is the Dragon. The Dragon makes sense with a dragon deck with 5 colors, and it helps the deck move faster than it normally would. The deck has a lot of cards that are double-edged swords, which makes the game much more fun, and it's like Forgetful Fish in that whenever you do something in the graveyard, you can potentially get it back or put it back on top of the library, and then the next player can get it. It's really fun because it's only for 2 players, and sometimes you might not have a third or fourth person, so this is a great way to combine a deck and be able to play together. So we're going to start with ramp this time. We've got Jeweled Lotus, Arcane Signet, and Sol Ring, Commander staples. Jeweled Lotus, of course, helping get the Dragon out, and Arcane Signet tapping for any color, which is very important, and then, of course, Sol Ring. Rampant Growth, this is just classic. Find the specific color you need, especially for 5 color. Cultivate, Kodama's Reach. These two both do more or less the same thing. Getting more lands to the table. Beneath the Sands, Road to Ruin. Both of these will get what you need with the lands. Beneath the Sands can cycle, and then Road to Ruin also has Aftermath, so you can play from the graveyard. And since we share a graveyard, both players have the opportunity to cast Ruin. Chromatic Orrery and Timeless Lotus, well, these two are just great in a 5-color deck, and whoever gets these is just going to be a huge threat to the other player. Lapis Orb of Dragonkind, and Pillar of Origins, just helping cast dragon spells and do dragon things. Lapis Orb of Dragonkind also scries 2, which is very important in these kind of decks. While you're sharing a deck, you can put the worst cards on top, or put the good cards on bottom, depending on what you want to do. Mana Bloom is just kind of a fun, hidden card that I really, really like. It's got a lot of synergies with 5 color, and then you can just cast it again when it's out of its charge counters, adding any color of mana. Really, really good. Seething Song just helps cast our red dragons. There's, dragons are mostly in red. If you're lacking maybe even 2 red mana, you can just pay 2 in red, and you'll get more. Prophetic Prism and Chromatic Sphere, both of these helping filter your mana, and they also draw cards. Card draw is very crucial, and this section of card draw might seem just maybe a tad weird, but it all works with this format, I promise. Jaloom Tome, just tap to draw a card, then discard a card. Jaloom Tome is actually pretty effective for what it is, and it's just a reusable source of card draw. Introduction to Prophecy, Joint Exploration, both of these scry and then draw a card, and then Joint Exploration, if you kick it, you can put a land from your hand on the battlefield. Draconic Lore, Harmonize, and Precognitive Perception, all of these just draw 3 cards. Draconic Lore costs less if you control a dragon, this is really great. And then Precognitive Perception can scry 3 and then draw 3, again helping with the top of the deck. Eureka Moment, draw 2 cards and put a land from your hand on the battlefield. Brainstorm and Telling Time, both of these kind of do things differently, but essentially you're putting things on the top or bottom of the deck and in your hand, so they can really help hinder the opponent while helping you. Fact or Fiction, kind of the same. You reveal the top 5 and then separate them into piles, and then an opponent separates them, and then you can kind of place them however you want, and it's really a really nice thing. Chemister's Insight, Deep Analysis, and Think Twice. They all draw some cards, but they all have some sort of graveyard shenanigans, so we got Flashback or Jumpstart, getting them out of the graveyard so either player can reuse them. Section 3 is, of course, our dragons. There's a ton of them, so get ready. Ganax, Astral Hunter, Reckless Barbarian, and Savage Ventmaw. These all do various things, of course, but they all add some sort of mana in different ways, which can really, really help move the deck along. Young Blue Dragon, this one scries 1 and then draws a card for its Sand Augury side, and then it's just a 3/3 flying when you cast it later. Furnace Whelp and Slumbering Dragon, just not really much comparison here, but they do make themselves bigger in certain ways, but dragons. Minion of the Mighty and Skanos Dragonheart. Minion of the Mighty is not actually a dragon, but whenever these attack, they get some sort of combat bonus, or Minion of the Mighty puts a dragon from your hand on the battlefield. They just help attacking things get bigger or put more out or whatever. Atarka World Render and Thrakus the Butcher. Both of them make your dragons very large when you attack. Very cool. Adult Gold Dragon and Palladium Moors the Ruiner. Just some big dragons that have lots lots of keywords, and Palladium Moore says hexproof as long as she hasn't dealt damage. Lazan Dragon's Legacy, Red Dragon, and Scourge of Valkus. These all do damage in different ways. Whenever you cast a dragon spell with Lazan, deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target that's not a commander. Red Dragon just deals 4 damage to each opponent, and then Scourge of Valkus enters and it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of dragons you control. And it does it with all your dragons, so these can potentially be very deadly. I did actually kill Jason one time with Lazan and Scourge of Valkus out. It was very fun for me. Sprite Dragon and Ramos Dragon Engine. These don't really match at all, but in the end, they get bigger when you cast spells, and then Ramos Dragon Engine can remove 5 counters to add 10 mana, which is really cool. Broodmate Dragon and Lathless Dragon Queen, both of them make dragons some sort of way, and Lathless does it every time another dragon comes out. Scale Lord Reckoner and Silumgar the Drifting Death. Both of them kind of just destroy things. Silumgar, when all your dragons attack, your opponent's creatures get -1/-1 for each dragon that attacked. So that's going to be pretty deadly. And then Scale or Reckoner, of course, destroy stuff, depending on if they're targeted or not. Draconic Muralists and Tiamat both search for dragons, one on death and one on entry. So you kind of steal all the best dragons out of the deck from underneath your opponent's nose. It is very fun. Nicobolus the Ravager. Cool Nicobolus, transform it into Nicobolus the Arisen. And it does a whole bunch of things that can just ruin your opponent. Kyodai, Soul of Kamigawa. When it enters, another permanent gets indestructible as long as you can control Kyodai. Very nice. Velomachus Lorehold, Flying Vigilance Haste, and when it attacks, you just look at the top 7. Cast an instance or sorcery from among them without paying its mana cost. And you can get like those cool ramp spells to get your deck even faster, or destroy spells, or whatever else it is. Okay, I did not put Karthus Tyrant of Jund in the deck for a reason. You might think, hey, that's a fantastic thing. Gain control of all dragons. There's so many dragons in the deck. But what this does for a 2-player game is whoever gets Karthus out wins. And to me, that's not very interesting. It's just kind of a race to get Karthus out, you know, with Tiamat or the Muralists. And it's just not very fun to me in this specific format. If you do it in a normal deck, that's totally fine. But in this deck, it's just too one-sided of a card, so I just didn't put it in the deck at all. This next section is a lot of removal, and it's all very important. These might seem very inefficient, and technically, yes, they are, but in this setting, they're actually really quite handy. Of course, like Forgetful Fish, we have Memory Lapse, counter target spell, but if it's countered, put it on top of your library so that you can steal it next turn. Extremely important that you have this in here. Banishing Stroke and Unexpectedly Absent. These put things back into the library. Unexpectedly Absent, you can put it underneath the top 1 card of your library, and so you'll draw it on a later turn, or maybe 2 down. Whatever you're planning, you can do that. Banishing Stroke just puts it on the bottom, but then, I don't know, maybe you can search for it later with Tiamat or whatever it is. Gone Missing and Grasp of Phantoms. This is what I'm talking about with inefficiency, but you put any permanent or creature on top of its owner's library, and one investigates so you can draw a card later, or Grasp of Phantoms lets you flash back the spell, so you can do that later. And it's 8 mana, but I have used it before and it's been very valuable. Sudden Substitution, this one has split second, so nobody can do anything until the spell resolves. We can exchange control of target non-creature spell and target creature. It just made sense to me for this deck to just steal something away, because you're always at this balance of giving and taking, like at a loss sometimes, but also not at a loss sometimes. I don't know. It's really neat. Fracture and Slice and Twain. These ones just destroy something. Fracture does artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. Slice and Twain does an artifact or enchantment and then draws a card. Shatter and Mortify. Mortify destroys a target creature or enchantment, and Shatter just destroys a target artifact. It is an instant, and we already know what artifacts are in the deck, so we can really use this to our advantage. Runic Shot. It's a sorcery, but for 1 white mana, you destroy a target tapped creature. That's actually really good. But if the spell was kicked for an extra blue, you scry 2. You know, for that extra mana, you can kind of pick and choose what your opponent draws. Assassin's Trophy. This is one of those double-edged swords. You destroy a permanent an opponent controls, but then they search for a basic land on the battlefield. So you're getting rid of their best thing potentially, while at the loss of a land. So it's a really... I think it's a really cool balance of what you're doing. Wind Shear, bet you none of you have heard of this card. All attacking creatures with flying get -2/-2 and lose flying until end of turn. That's just, most everything in the deck's going to have flying. Some of those D&D dragons don't, so this is a huge advantage for those creatures, but they also lose some power and toughness, helping you in the end. Last but not least, we have some things that just help the dragon creatures along. Just some dragon help, if you will. Dragon Tempest, of course, whenever a creature with flying enters under your control, it gains haste. Most things have flying, and whenever a dragon enters under your control, it deals X damage, where X is the number of dragons you control. It's just, come on. Crucible of Fire, no dragon deck is complete without this card. Dragons you control go +3/+3. Huge advantage against opponents. Dragon Arch and Quicksilver Amulet. Both of these do similar things where you can just put things from your hand onto the battlefield. It just helps move along, especially with a 5-color deck. And then you just use any color to put something from your hand onto the battlefield. Vanquisher's Banner. Of course, choose dragons. Those dragons get +1/+1. And whenever you cast a dragon, you draw a card. There's nothing, like 0 negatives to this card. Eternal Witness. Just get something from your graveyard to your hand, and just take something really great out of the graveyard that our opponent lost. Last card is Sheltering Light. It's another thing that scries, and then target creature gains indestructible until end of turn. I didn't want to put too many of these in the deck, because then you're constantly worried about, oh, my spell is just gonna fizzle, because you really want things to move along, and if things aren't being destroyed, it kind of makes the game longer than it should be. If someone has Sheltering Light and one of your dragons gains indestructible, that's just it's a really cool bonus to, like, this is the only protection spell in the deck, and so you can really turn the tides with it. Anyway, I think it's a neat idea. Anyway, what do you guys think of the deck? Maybe it's too simple, but it is kind of a first draft for the deck. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if there's any better cards in here, because I know some of them are probably bad. But yeah, let me know in the comments below, and make sure you like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss your weekly dose of magic.